Hello and welcome to today's video. So this time we're taking a look at the Exeter Westpoint Toy Fair, 24th of April 2022. So a huge queue going in, much bigger than usual, but when we got in, actually greeted by a few less stalls than we were expecting. Certainly less than the January fair, just a couple of months ago, which was really quite a nice selection of stalls, but this time round not quite as many dealers were on evidence. Not quite sure why. Maybe the timing. For a lot of people it was the day before payday, but that didn't seem to stop the attendees, but it did seem to somehow put off some of the dealers. Not quite sure why. However, there was a good little mix of stuff, perhaps not quite as much of like the vintage Star Wars or some of the more modern action figure stuff that we've seen in recent visits, but still there was some of that, and of course the usual selection of trains, die casts, Matchbox cards, that sort of thing. So, we'll see what we'll see, but there was, I believe, something for everybody in the end. It just, wasn't a massive amount of choice. But as we start off, I systematically worked my way around almost the entire room here and stopped and looked at anything of interest. Now, there certainly seemed to be plenty of loose, unboxed die-cast cards from all the main sort of toy companies, Corgi, Dinky, Matchbox, loads and loads of it. Hot Wheels, there was stacks of it, but I think I saw one or two people going around checking out the boxes of loose stuff. Beyond that, didn't see a lot of die-casts actually moving. There were some stalls selling a bit of Lego, and that's certainly come of age of late. The train stalls seem to be busier than the stalls selling traditional die-cast. That was my own sort of personal observation. And having looked at the prices online for some of this stuff recently, with a view to buying some of this, I found on the whole the dealers at Westpoint were asking above internet prices for what stuff was selling for, and I think that was quite telling, and it was just putting people off. Lots and lots of stalls of cheap Matchbox and Hot Wheels modern carded stuff, 3 for a £5. Absolutely fantastic if you've got youngsters and they want to come along and pick up a few cheap toys to actually play with. Naturally, you're going to get a few modern Star Wars figures, vintage collection, some of the retro figures as well. It just wasn't quite as much of this as we've seen in the past. Lots and lots of cool train stuff though, Hornby, 00 and what have you. A fantastic range of that. Some stores were really rammed with real quality toys, and others were a bit more haphazard, as we'll see in a minute. But certainly every sort of genre of collecting seemed to have been covered. There wasn't a great deal of like retro gaming or video gaming, but there was a little bit of it. There was one stall that had like a little section on it. And this is some Britain's figures here. Some die-cast, some Doctor Who figures. the inevitable Funko Pop. There's a little bit of retro game in there. Nice to see a few old Atari games and things like that. And of course, stalls selling loose, unboxed but more modern action figures. Always another popular area of Westpoint. A few 60s comics there. Quite nice to see. They're in quite nice condition as well. And a few better condition die-cast models. Yeah, plenty to see if you like your train sets, that is for certain. Now, one real complaint, which is just aimed at fairs in general and stall holders, is the tiny percentage that actually take a credit or debit card. There was probably only 3 or 4 stalls there that actually were offering to take cards. Some were charging a premium for the service as well, like 50p if you wanted to pay by card, which I believe is actually illegal these days. But you can get tiny little machines that can take a card payment. They're like less than £20, so there really is no real reason not to be able to take cards these days. And it puts some of the people I were with, it actually put them off buying stuff, because I said I would have had that, but I just don't have the cash on me. And just ridiculous, really. And all I can really think of is it's like a little fiddle. It's cash straight into your back pocket, and you don't want the money to be recorded. But it did seem a bit silly, that. And I think that's something which, it needs to be changed. I mean, it's just, guys, you need to get into the 21st century here. But that was, one of my few gripes. Oh, look, 50p to take a card. Don't think you're allowed to do that anymore. Obviously, the bigger, more established dealers did take card, and I have to say those were the busier stalls. Some of them were a real mishmash of stuff. I do, however, like the original Mousetrap board game, and I did actually end up buying that because the whole family loved that one, so we actually brought it back and have played it. So it was one of the few bits I did pick up at the show. I picked up a few little boxed Matchboxes that I had as a kid, which I was looking to get back. And those were, about going rate or slightly less. So I wasn't too, I was quite pleased about that. There were, however, some people who were massively out on their prices, and they've obviously not looked at what stuff's selling for online lately. Still had some nice bits and pieces. There was the usual array of TV and movie die-cast cars, which are always popular. They still had quite a nice selection as well. Some decent old stock there. Lots and lots of action figures, and these are the popular rummage boxes. 3 for a tenner. That's the sort of price people don't mind paying that for a few action figures, do they? That was interesting. Space Nick 2. I guess a late 60s thing. Trays and trays of these guys. As I said, I only saw a couple of people actually looking through them. But yet almost every store had loads and loads of them. I mean, I just don't think they must be selling, you know. There's some quite nice stuff on here. Mixture of ancient and modern again. There we are, Toy Hunter was his name. It's some very nice stuff. I wouldn't say he was full of bargains, but the quality was there, and I think that's what is key. There were only a handful of stalls which had real quality toys. This was one of them. And for that, you know, he asked a premium, but at least you feel like you're getting quality stuff. Some nice early Lego there, very nice to see. Doesn't sell for a lot, but it's nice to see it all the same. A surprising amount of earlier Airfix kits and that, and some Airfix soldier sets. So really nice to see that. Just great box artwork on those. Some of the Product Enterprise sets, they're very, very nice. Being great investments, those as well. More tables of trains. I mean, if you were looking for something specific in the world of trains, I think you would have found it at Westpoint, because, you know, the collectors were really well served. I think if you were looking for specific die-cast, you might have found it, but there weren't the same dealers that were there in January. And one of the series I've been toying with, at least getting a feel for the market, is the Corgi Chipperfield circus sets. And I think they're really, really nice. And I wouldn't mind starting to pick, say, one or two up at each show, but they're just not there and they weren't there this time, but at the January show they definitely were. So I just think this particular fair was missing a few of the bigger sort of mint in box die-cast dealers. They decided to give this one a miss. However, there were lots of bargains, so there was really, I think most of the dealers were up for making deals, and they were accepting offers, which is always good to hear. So I heard a fair bit of bartering going on, and most of it, to be honest, successful. I think the dealers were just glad to be selling stock to cover their expenses and make the day worthwhile. A few of the dealers, and I have to say it was like the Funko Pop dealers and the dealers with the more modern merchandise, they were doing well and they were generally busy, and good on them really. This had some interesting stuff. Nice mixture of some sort of older toys and what have you, and some vintage as well. As you can see by now, the fair has been open about 45 minutes, half an hour to 45 minutes, and it's starting to get a bit busier, and most of the stalls were quite well crowded, although I did overhear at least one dealer say he was probably going to knock it on the head and make this his last one. So I don't know. Talking with my friends about this on the way up to Exeter, we're sort of thinking that, the average age of these dealers here selling these old die-casts has got to be 65 plus. A lot of them in retirement now. I'm doing this as a bit of a hobby, and you have to wonder, how long are these people going to carry on, getting up on a Sunday morning and travelling to a toy fair? The time will come when, it will just be a bit much, or it just isn't going to be worth it anymore. Some nice farm stuff there. There really was a real mixture of stuff. Some tin plate. Some good stuff on display. There was really a world of difference with the actual displays though. So some people, table, they've got everything out and looks quite neat and tidy. Others, as you've seen, have been quite disarray, a table of disarray, shall we say, or they're trying to put too much onto a too small a table, and we saw that a couple of times as well. But this isn't too badly laid out, and you can clearly see what's what. Little Pink Panther car there, which not that particular one, but one like it, a friend of mine picked up while we were up there, and I remember having that as a kid, of the dinky Pink Panther car. As I said, endless amounts of like loose die casts, which some people were job lining it out, others 3 for a $5 sort of thing. Here's some more vintage loose stuff, but I didn't see anyone even looking through it, to be honest. There just didn't seem to be any sort of demand like that. Just the very, very cheap and cheerful seemed to be had a few people around it. So I guess people were looking for bargains. And that's what to take from that. The other thing I've been on the little lookout for is some shop display stuff. A little run of Smurfs there, they were quite nice. They still had some more interesting bits and pieces, and it looks like he'd sold some stuff straight off the bat because there was a lot of space on the table. So I think he's already sold some bits and pieces. So there's a realist dealer, price to sell, and come along and move it, Which is interesting. This was a store predominantly full of Lego stuff. Some good stuff on display. It's a shame that this particular store weren't at the last Lego Fest in Plymouth, because they would have done very well with what they had on display. And there was another dedicated Lego stall a little bit later on that we'll see, which had lots and lots of the more modern play sets, which would have cleaned up at the Lego Fair in Plymouth. Bits and pieces here if you're doing scale dioramas. And there's those nice Airfix kits again. Those are reissues of some classic kits from the 60s and 70s, and they're really nice. I had a couple when I was a kid, and it was good to see that they've brought those back out again. Sadly, my son's grown out of toy soldiers, so there was literally no excuse for me to actually buy them. But it was nice to see them with those classic boxes. These were nice. Now, this store had a particularly nice selection of TV and film-related die-casts, and I think one of my friends bought a couple of bits from this store, a couple of the small Corgi carded figures. This was nice. It was the Beatles Yellow Submarine Eurostar. Wow. Looked pretty cool. I mean, massive tables of Hot Wheels stuff. I didn't see a single person while I was there pick up even like a 3 for a $5 deal. Quite surprising, really. And I don't know why. I just don't know why. But there's some good stuff here. This was mainly military vehicles, and they're quite interesting to see. And I know that there are some people who just like to specialise in military die-cast, and I can see the appeal. It's certainly like themed, like there are people who collect just emergency vehicles, for example, as well. There you go. You see, there are a few bargains to be had there. If you've got your mind set on something and you're willing to spend the time going through, the endless boxes that were on offer, I think you could do all right. A few more bits of modern vintage, shall we say, creeping into it. And there are some vintage Star Wars which we've not come across yet, but there was at least one stall that had at least some of it. A nice big wall of Funko. Certainly people were buying this. Whatever your thoughts on it. Some dinky re-released stuff. This is quite nice. Some sort of more modern Funko bits and pieces again. Some of the trading cards. Didn't really see anybody going up for any of that. And then some more recent superhero stuff as well, and vintage collection on the end there. More traditional die-cast now, which is no shortage of that. I mean, literally every stall had something, I think. But, that's predominantly what the show always was. It's billed as a toy and train show, not an action figure show. And I think sometimes, even if the market's there, you can tend to sort of forget that that's not what it's supposed to be. It was billed as a toy and train show, which is quite traditional in that sense. I think this store was one of the ones that had some really nicely presented stuff, old and new again. And I think if you can find the right balance, you can have, you can ask the money. It's when you've got a real slapdash store and you're asking top price, then I just think, you're dreaming, This store had some reasonable stuff. It was quite well packed, but it was pretty high end price wise, as I recall. They were sort of at the top end prices. But that's okay, at least you can all see it. At least it's not toys on top of toys. It's quite nicely presented, so you can actually view it. A nice little collection of tractors and good shelving as well. So just the sort of thing you need when you go into a toy fair. So you can make the most of the space that you've got. This was actually on and working, that one, that truck. And, that was a really nicely presented store. I believe he took a card. More figures and things like that. Another stall, a little bit of a mishmash here, but once again, if you're willing to take the time to go through it all, I suppose there was stuff. Unfortunately, none of it seemed to be priced, which means literally every time you pick something up, you've got to ask the dealer how much it is. Not ideal, but it is what it is. Another tray of military stuff there, and some other smaller die casts. That was a packed old store, wasn't it? Look at that. More carded Hot Wheels. This store was a bit of a laugh. I mean, I didn't even bother asking him what he wanted for those mock carded figures. So he had a couple of original Star Wars 12 packs. And they were opened, and there was no bubbles or anything. He just put a loose figure in the front of them. There's a Jawa there, and there was that Han Solo one. I'm guessing he probably wanted a couple £100 for that. None of his stuff was priced. He was more, I think he was an exhibitor rather than a dealer, and we've seen those before, haven't we? Literally nothing had a price on. Which is, sometimes, he just doesn't want to put a sticker on. But at the end of the day, what are you there for, honestly? Some big old boats. We're coming to near the end now. We've almost seen all the dealers already, if you can believe it. Which, in a way, it's a little disappointing. Now, this chap, excellent stuff. He has some really quality items which were very reasonably priced because they were high grade. So if you look at the store, everything on it was tip-top condition. Some new bits, lots of nice vintage stuff as well, and it was all in absolute tip-top condition. There was the Pink Panther car that my friend bought. He has some I bought a couple of Matchbox cars off him, but yeah, he had a nice little selection of stuff and deserved the business, and that's what you want, really. If it's nicely presented, as this stall is, you don't mind paying a premium if the quality's there, and it was on that stall. And in fact, the stall next to it wasn't actually too bad either. This stall had another quite a decent selection of stuff as well, which was good to see. But unfortunately, the stalls like this were, I'm afraid, a bit few and far between, which was a shame. And I think that does sort of sum up this particular fair in a nutshell, really, in that there was good stuff there. It was few and far between. Although there was loads of customers, people didn't seem to be buying, and none of the dealers seemed particularly busy, with a couple of exceptions, and they were the ones who had a selection of modern stuff, and also they took card, and I think that did make a big difference. This was quite a nice stall. They had some good stuff, nice vintage stuff. I mean, not lots of it, but what they had was pretty good. Quite a nice mixture of sort of modern and semi-vintage stuff, sort of 70s and 80s up, odd 60s annual there. I remember this store was incredible. I mean, he said make me an offer, but all the prices were double what you would expect to see. This was a fantastic store for Lego. I mean, easily the best store there. Unfortunately, I didn't really see anyone looking to buy any of it. But, you know, what a shame. If this guy had been once again at the Plymouth Lego Brickfest, he would have cleaned up, because there was nothing like this at the Lego Fair in Plymouth, which was a couple of months back. It's crazy, really. So I hope this guy did all right, because he had some really good stuff there. Almost worked my way back to the front door now. I'm on the last little row, and I've been round, and you've been with me to go around virtually all the stalls here. We've not missed much. And yeah, there were a few stalls which we were hoping to see that just weren't there. The dealers just weren't there this time round, for whatever reason. But I mean, £4 for an adult to get in, it's certainly not a high admission. They got the cafe on site, that, get yourself a cup of tea, and even if you just go in there just to have a little look, I think there was enough of interest there to warrant it. And if you were looking, well, as I said, there probably was something for everybody, but you had to sort of dig deep to find it. But I'll certainly keep going to it. I think the next Westpoint is in August. And if I'm free, I shall definitely be heading off to that one. Thanks very much for sitting through this one today. Hope you have enjoyed it. And you do let me know in the comments what your thoughts are about dealers perhaps starting to take credit or debit cards. I think it's something that should be on the ascendancy rather than in the minority. Anyway, thanks very much for watching today. Do hit that subscribe button if you've not already. I'm starting to cover the shows now that the pandemic is over and we're getting back out again. And I certainly intend doing more of these sorts of videos in the future. So if you have liked it, do enjoy and hit that like button, and do hit the subscribe button for regular vintage retro toy content. And I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye.